Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. This week brought breaking news that Bernie Madoff, architect of the biggest Ponzi scheme in history, died in prison at age 82. I spoke about the historic scheme with Oscar-winning actor Richard Dreyfuss, who played Bernie Madoff in the ABC miniseries Madoff. Enjoy. Mr. Dreyfuss, thanks so much for taking the time to come on WTOP. It's a pleasure.
It's fun. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Well, obviously, we're here to talk Madoff. You're playing Bernie Madoff. Here it's a TV miniseries on ABC. Man, this has become such a hot topic lately. Not only with The Big Short out in Hollywood, Wall Street's all the rage and looking at the corruption of it.
Yeah, it's actually been timely for months and years in the past, but now the stars have aligned so blatantly that people really would have to work hard to ignore it.
Yeah, I guess greed has been, quote, good for a couple decades now, but yeah, the stars are aligning. Talk about, obviously Bernie Madoff, his Ponzi scheme, I think, ripped off $65 billion from unsuspecting victims. How do you flip the switch in your mind and play someone, that has so little disregard for others? Is it like the third man, you're Orson Welles up on the Ferris wheel looking at people as dots below? Or, how do you get into that mindset where you just have disregard for everyone else?
Well, wouldn't it be funny if only nice actors played nice guys and only rotten actors played rotten guys? You'd have a hole in the wall somewhere, and it's the actor's obligation to find what he's got to find and play it convincingly. So it's not my problem; it's the audience's problem. 50 years from now, no one's going to know or be interested in my politics. They're only going to be interested in how well I do the part.
Well, how did you tap into that side of Bernie and yet still humanize him for us that are watching him and see him as a real person?
My theory is really simple, that inside of us is Bernie and Satan and Jesus. And you have to find the appropriate, the comparable amount of Bernie inside of you already. And you can usually find it if you're honest with yourself whenever you think about going into traffic. Because when you're in traffic, some guy cuts you off and you start screaming bloody murder, how dare you? I got kids in the car, for crying out loud. You endangered my children, you son of a... And then you realize that you've yelled so long, you're missing your exit. And you cut across 3 lanes of traffic. And everyone starts honking at you, and you say, "What's the matter? Give me a break. Come on. I just had to get out of here." And all of a sudden, in one exchange, you're both Bernie and Jesus. And you've got to find the appropriateness and bring it out and make it fit. And there's no such thing as a perfect person. Ye gods, there's no such thing. And actors just have to be honest with themselves in order to bring out the right and most appropriate feeling to fit the character they're playing. It doesn't mean you have to wink at the audience or anything. You just have to know how to apply what you know about yourself and make it apply to the character.
When you were, obviously we'd all heard of his, crime and everything in the newspapers and on TV, but is there anything that you sort of, in delving into the role and researching it, that you discovered about the man that maybe was different than your perception of him having just read in the newspapers?
When I first started in on this character, I assumed that I was going to find certain likable characteristics and qualities, and that I could empathize with him about those things. And I found out that there really weren't. He was a done deal. He was already baked and ready to be wrapped. He just waited for the appropriate moment, and he skipped across the line very comfortably. And whereas most other Ponzi schemes lasted for 1/50th the amount of time that his did, he was able to say later on, my Ponzi scheme lasted for 40 years, and aside for the money spent on making it look and feel real, he spent that money on himself.
Yeah.
And he had no problem in just canvassing around and finding not really likable qualities, but the qualities you need to be a good con man. And that meant you had to reassure your clients to be that you were comfy and fun to be with and smart, just like Uncle Bernie should be. Not knowing, or at least the clients not knowing, that the next move was going to have you sign your name to a dotted line, which was the equivalent of slitting your own throat.
Right.
And it was a fun challenge for him.
Interesting. You know, such a big role in this miniseries too is the wife, Ruth Madoff, played by Miss Danner. Talk about your relationship working with her.
Clyde Danner and I have managed to work with one another at the very beginning of my career, at the top height of my career, at the fade of my career, twice. And we have an acknowledged comfort. We're like old shoes, you know. And she's not only beautiful and talented, she's smart as hell.
Yeah.
And we don't have to, we're almost at the point where we finish one another's sentences. And the thing about Blythe is we don't have to feel the same way about the character or the script. She may like Ruth. She may not like Ruth. She may have found reason to have Ruth know what was going on or not. I'm not really sure, nor is it important for me to agree with her.
Right.
It's what's important is that the end characterization fits and fits like a glove. I'm pretty sure that she does not feel the same way that I feel about all those characters. I don't at all think that we're obligated to feel the same way. In my opinion, Ruth Madoff and the boys didn't know squat about what he was doing as a criminal.
Okay. They knew the personal side, but didn't know all the ins and outs of the scheme.
Yeah, the personal side was that he was a very loving father who ruled with a firm hand. He was a very loving husband who loved her from the time he was 16 years old. And so you see that throughout the piece. And that's what you would expect to see in any family like mine. I grew up in the same little area that he did. You know, we're both from Bayside, and although he lived there about 5 or 6 years after I did, he and I probably knew the same people and hung out with the same guys.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's why I feel as strongly as I do that that they didn't know. You know, I can imagine. Where were you raised?
I was raised in Frederick, Maryland, not far from D.C.
Frederick, Maryland.
It was just like American Graffiti, except it was 1984 instead of where were you in '62?
Yeah. And what did your father do?
He was a carpenter.
And were you ever tempted to say to your father, I don't believe you're a carpenter. What do you really do?
No, I always believed it. No.
Yeah. Yeah. You always did. And because he was your dad.
Exactly.
And that's exactly how Ruth felt and how the boys felt.
Interesting.
And you'd be shocked out of your skin to find out otherwise.
Very true.
And that's the way we were all raised. If your father said such and such, you went for it. You bought it.
Yeah, you mentioned fathers. I know we're up against the clock, so this will probably have to be our bow out. But before we go, you mentioned fathers, and to me, the great father role you played in Close Encounters just still echoes all these years later with the mashed potato mountain and everything else. And then, I mean, you're also in Jaws, and Roy Scheider has the great father figure with the great scene folding his fingers and all. You know, I mean, you've been a part of some great father presentation movies.
Yeah, and all the characters that I played that had fathers in them that were made before 1982 were all practice. and I mean, consciously, I was practicing being a good father. Just had to wait for having children.
Does that mean your other father roles after that, like Dr. Leo Marvin, were shaped off of a little of having done it in real life?
Well, I guess, they were informed by it, but like fatherhood, there's constant surprises. And you can't have it your own way. My daughter, who is the proverbial apple in my eye, called me once when she was in her early 20s. And she said, "Dad, do you remember that time when I didn't think you had any authority over me, and I didn't respect you, and I didn't listen to you, and I thought you were a silly man?" And I said, "Yes, I do remember that." And she said, "Well, I just realized I was wrong." And I listened. And then she said, "Anyway, about going to Thanksgiving." And I said, hold it. You're not going to get off this subject that quickly because one apology doesn't make up for 10 years of hell.
Right.
So I made her detail her apology a little bit more. And I said, one day, when you have kids, you're going to see your wonderful child or children at the moment you turn, let's say, 13 or 14, aliens will come down and leave a robot in place and take your kid.
You would know.
And that alien is programmed just to irritate. And you'll know what it's like. And that's probably exactly what's going to happen. Anyway, listen, I got to go.
Yeah, thanks so much for diving into that analogy right there with the fathers. That was unexpected, but awesome. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.